I got in a fight. I shouldn't have done it. You know, my mom always told me, Zealand, don't get in fights. It wasn't a very prophetic saying. It was just, you know, her being a mom and saying maybe you shouldn't get in fights. But I did. I dug in on Twitter, no less. I decided, I mean, there can't be a worse place to get into a fight with anyone. But it was this guy. Said there's another international break in October and another one in November. And I got particularly sad. I mean, there's 55,000 people that liked this tweet. And maybe you don't know my lore, so let me explain my lore to you. Right, growing up in the United States, soccer, particularly the, you know, non-Premier League leagues or whatever, just the world of soccer in general was incredibly foreign. Like when I was born, it was very foreign. And over the course of my life, it has become a lot less foreign. But the way I was introduced to the world of soccer in the first place, the way what reeled me in for the first time was the 2006 World Cup game that came out on Nintendo DS. And that came out, and I remember loading into it and going, wow, like Saudi Arabia plays this sport. I had no idea, right? You're sitting there, you're not even 10 years old yet, you're playing this game going, oh, you know, hold on a second. Like we've got basketball, we've got NFL, and I know the rest of the world is out there, which is better than a lot of Americans already, right? I knew the rest of the world was out there. I just didn't know that they all played this sport, right? The sport that I played growing up. A lot of people in the U.S. do play soccer growing up. That's why the phrase soccer moms was coined, you know, get the minivan, bring the orange slices, soccer moms, right? And so I just remember there was a loading screen on the game. It was, you know, camels, desert, whatever. They had a loading screen for each team that had made the World Cup, and it was the Saudi Arabia loading screen. I was like, oh, that's crazy. Trinidad and Tobago. I didn't even know what that was. And I was from Florida. I mean, I'm closer to Trinidad and Tobago than most people. I hadn't gotten that far in my human development to figure out what it was, where it was. It was just some place I'd never heard of. All of a sudden, hey, they've got a team. They're here. Obviously, the United States has a team. And the core concept to me was just so cool. Because while the Olympics are amazing, it's a bunch of sports that generally you don't care about. This was a sport that I played. This was a sport that I liked playing. Right? This is a sport that I liked watching. And there was a team for everybody, every country in the world. It was just a concept that was so cool to me, right? The idea that every country in the world could compete against each other at this one thing. And the World Cup would end up being this big, grand result at the end of it. So now all of my chips are on the table. You know that I came into the sport and was kind of introduced into the world of football by international football. It was my first love. It was my first love. Hold on, somebody just came into... I'm a mod now for, Zealand's Twitch streams. Somebody came in typing !code, !pre-order. They were just looking for my code to give them a code to buy FM26 early, which you probably shouldn't do, but if you're going to, Zealand does have a code for that. That's a discount. Okay, I think they got it. Good for them. So when I saw this, I got offended. Not incredibly offended, not in an annoyed internet way. I just said people like this genuinely blow my mind. If you can't enjoy watching Bolivia stun Brazil, I don't know what else there is for you to enjoy. And that's my genuine thought. I think some of the best moments, some of the best stories that football has to offer come from the international side of the game. I think they do. Not all of them, obviously. I mean, some of the greatest moments in the history of the sport also come from the club side. But it'd be disingenuous to say that the international part of the game doesn't produce a lot of I mean, how many times have you watched the World Cup goals compilation from the last one or the one before that, right? Like, it lives in the zeitgeist. But I need to acknowledge something. I need to acknowledge something. It would be behoove me to acknowledge that there is a point that this person is making. Because as much as this post turned into them hating on international football in general, and I got into that debate kind of under my post a little bit, right? There was somebody that said I'd scrap international football tomorrow given the chance, and I replied the World Cup's literally the biggest event in the history of humanity, which is true. It is the most watched event in the history of humanity, likely both percentage-wise, definitely numbers-wise, but likely also percentage-wise, as in percentage of humanity they're participating in one thing. It is bigger than the Olympics. Not by a ton, but it is, right? Especially at the highest level. It's the biggest event in the history of humanity, and it's not the Champions League final, right? So the world agrees, and I think particularly the world outside of Europe agrees that international football is relevant. But there is a point being made here, which is that there are so many international breaks, particularly at the start of the season. And I'd never really thought about this. I mean, obviously, the debates about fixture congestion have dominated recent discourse, right? The idea that maybe there are too many matches being played. Yes, we've explored that concept before. Maybe just you might want to turn that down a little bit. This is about the back and forth, the travel distances, the lack of time in international camps, right? That's what this is about. And I mean, it's the only period of the season where they go September, October, November, 3 straight months, international breaks. I don't know why they decided to set it up like that. I have no idea. But the more you think about it, the less it makes sense. Then there's one in March, and then in the summer, there's a couple of windows that happen, but obviously most of the biggest leagues in the world are going to go through the winter window. So they're really only going to be disrupted 3 times at the start of the season and 1 time at the end. But apparently there is a solution that is being presented, and it's a solution that I like. So as much as I am surprised I'm saying this, I agree at least in part with the premise of that tweet that initially I vehemently disagreed with. And that's because FIFA's made a decision that makes a lot of sense to me. September international breaks are getting longer for 2026 in a move that will bring the disappearance of the October international break. The change is being made for a number of reasons. Fair enough. These include 2026 World Cup final having the latest date for a Summer World Cup since 1966, with the match due to be played on the 19th of July. Total side note, the 250th birthday of America's during the World Cup next year. I realized that I was talking to somebody about it, and yeah, that's going to be going on, so that'll be fun. Player welfare also featured the discussions that took place with stakeholders and all of FIFA confederations prior to approval. Travel considerations are obviously a huge factor. They want to cut down on the number of times that players are having to particularly move continents, but also reducing the number of disruptions. And I think there's so many positives, stuff that I already mentioned in this video, to having longer international breaks. But when's this start? The next year. There will be instead an increased September break with no October break and a regular November break. So they're basically cutting the international breaks from 5 to 4. You've got your summer, you've got your March, you've got your November, and then you've got a long September one. It's a 3-week gap from domestic matches in September, and countries will play 4 international matches in that window instead of 2. This is going to be the most important international break of the entire calendar going forward. Right, because if you're playing 4 matches in one window in World Cup qualifying, that could be 4 of 6 matches you have in the entire group stage, which means you got to make sure your players are fit and healthy for that step of the season internationally and everything else. It's also going to mean that there is more time to build up the incredibly important international matches that are occurring. This is a great thing, right? More and more people will be aware of Cape Verde against Cameroon and be able to tune in to watch a team like Cape Verde play for potential World Cup berth, right? Because the focus will sustain for longer on the international side of the game. Now, I am aware, obviously, of the downside of this. Mainly the downside of this is people during the September international break are going to be losing their fucking minds, right? Because there is a collection of people that I don't understand. That clearly experience the sport in a different way than I do, which is totally fine. That look at the international break as nothing more than a nuisance. And I'll be honest, if it was just friendlies, I would be looking at it the same way. But now when you've got, intense World Cup qualifying matches going on, I just can't get along with that train of thought anymore. But if it was just 4 friendlies disrupting the club schedule, yeah, it would be annoying. But now there's almost no international friendlies anymore. It feels like you're either qualifying for your continental tournament, playing your continental tournament, qualifying for the World Cup, or playing that. And in the meantime, in CONCACAF and Europe, you've got freaking Nations League going on. It's a competitive match every single time. And so when that break comes around, because I'm sure, as much as I'd love to pretend that Zealandism is the place where literally every single football fan gets their news. And while we're probably a few months away from that being the reality, a lot of people are going to be tactically ambushed by this. We're going to get to next September after the World Cup, and there's going to be a 3-week gap with 4 international matches in it, nearly a month without club football, and there's going to be a lot of people losing their minds. In that case, just go ahead and grab your popcorn, and it's going to be fun. Also, this isn't new news. right? BBC decided to just write this article because it became a talking point again, but the move to switch to an extended September break was approved by FIFA in 2023. The council that's made up of representatives from all 6 FIFA confederations. The removal of the October break means that in total, 1 week fewer in the domestic season has lost international fixtures. So, because, that obviously cuts down on the travel time and stuff. So anybody that is having a crash out next September during this, just remind them very helpfully that this actually this creates an extra week of the season. So while this isn't like an actually massive move to lessen the load on players, it's not an entirely insignificant one either. This is a rare not miss from FIFA's board in general.